Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer, shall we? Today, we're going to completely shift how we view body language. Since you're joining me, you already know how absolutely crucial communication is. So, we're moving away from that old, rigid habit of decoding people like they're walking puzzles. Instead, we're going to learn how to read them like a living, breathing system. Now, think about a mismatch we've literally all experienced. A friend tells you, "I'm fine." Well, if you only hear the words, you might just nod and move on. But if they're saying it through gritted teeth, with tight shoulders, and totally avoiding your gaze, yeah, you immediately know the conversation isn't actually over. This perfectly hits the nail on the head of what we're tackling today. Before anyone says a single word, they're already communicating. Think of an interaction like a movie scene. The words someone speaks, they're just the captions at the bottom of the screen. But the nonverbal cues, they provide the lighting, the frame, the soundtrack, the whole reality of the scene. You can read the caption alone for sure, but you are going to completely misunderstand the entire moment if you ignore everything happening around it. So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover why silence speaks, reading clusters, how context changes meaning, the interaction loop, and finally, becoming fluent. All right, let's jump straight into section 1, why silence still speaks. Most people don't actually struggle with language itself, they struggle with mixed messages. Picture this, a colleague gives you cheerful words, but they've got a tight jaw, a totally flat tone, and a really distant posture. You feel that friction, right? The surface message just doesn't match the hidden signal underneath. Our goal here is to stop getting confused by that mismatch and start treating it as highly valuable information. Which brings us to section 2, reading clusters, not just individual clues. So, most folks treat body language like this fixed dictionary. They think they know exactly what one specific gesture means. If I were to ask a room full of people what it means when someone folds their arms, almost everyone jumps to the exact same conclusion. Yep, defensiveness or anger. That is the classic immediate assumption most of us make. We've been trained by all those pop psychology articles to think that one specific physical cue always equals one specific internal emotion. But honestly, that is incredibly misleading. Treating body language as a rigid dictionary is just completely flawed. I mean, a person with crossed arms might just be in a freezing cold room, or maybe they're protecting their chest, or listening to you incredibly carefully. Actually, scratch that, some people just find crossing their arms physically comfortable. A single cue doesn't give you certainty at all. It only gives you a probability of a temporary state. It's really helpful to think of physical cues like a smoke alarm. A smoke alarm can be triggered by, burnt toast, a blown out candle, or a raging fire. It's useful because it warns you early that something is happening, but it's your job to look around and figure out what the actual fire is. So we really need to stop clue hunting and start pattern reading. It's fluid, kind of like the weather. You wouldn't look at a single dark cloud and instantly assume a hurricane is coming, right? No way. You feel the temperature drop, you notice the wind picking up, you hear distant thunder. Communication works exactly the same way. We've got to look for clusters of cues that reinforce each other to get a true read on the atmosphere. It's exactly like a car dashboard. When the warning lights clash, it tells us to pay closer attention to the whole cluster. If your speedometer says you're doing 60, but the engine is sputtering and the check engine light is flashing, you don't just trust the speedometer. When you see a cheerful face but hear a flat voice, or get a friendly phrase delivered with absolutely zero warmth, that's your dashboard flashing. It's telling you the surface message isn't the full story. Moving right along to section 3, how context changes the meaning. Context acts like a massive lens that completely filters meaning. Take a low voice, for example. In a quiet library, it just means you're following the rules. But that exact same low voice in the middle of a heated argument, that might mean withdrawal or barely contained anger. The action is identical, but the context completely changes the emotional interpretation. Instead of assuming, context helps us ask the right questions. Is the space quiet, or are they uncertain? Are they just resting their arms, or are they guarded? All right, let's look at section 4, the interaction loop. You see, timing changes meaning entirely. Observing when a cue happens during this 3-step flow tells a much richer story. A pause before someone answers a question, that often signals thoughtfulness. But a long pause after a difficult question? That usually signals discomfort. A smile at the beginning sets a warm tone, but a sudden smile right after a tense comment might just be deflection. You really have to watch the dynamic flow of the interaction.
And alongside timing, physical space acts like a volume knob. Stepping forward or backward drastically adjusts the emotional temperature. Leaning in during a heartfelt conversation with a friend turns the volume way up on support and empathy. But if a total stranger leans in exactly the same way, yikes, that turns the volume up on intrusion and discomfort. How we arrange ourselves physically is a huge part of the message we're broadcasting.
Finally, Section 5, becoming fluent in nonverbals. These 4 simple rules right here are the real game changers. They transform you from a guesser into a true pattern reader. You don't need to be some sort of human lie detector. Just watch for what's being shown, check the context around it, note any sudden changes, like a relaxed person suddenly going rigid, and see how the other person in the loop responds. It takes all the pressure off. You aren't cracking a secret code, you're just paying attention to the living system of the conversation. So, I want to leave you with this. In your very next interaction, ask yourself, what are you communicating before the words even arrive? Think about the lighting, the soundtrack, and the frame you're providing to the other person. The silence is always speaking. The question is, what is yours saying?